They arrived at prom like any other teenagers, smiling, carefree, and blissfully unaware of the whispers around them. But behind their polished shoes and glittering dresses lay a secret that would leave everyone speechless. Because if people knew how their story began, they'd never look at this prom the same way again. At first glance, Tatum Kelly and Leighton Long looked like any other high school prom dates. They stepped out of the limo, bathed in the golden glow of the hotel's grand entrance. The cameras flashed, laughter bubbled in the crisp night air, and the hum of excited chatter filled the space between the beats of the music leaking from inside. They smiled, posed for pictures, and let themselves get swept up in the magic of the night. They were just two teenagers enjoying their senior prom. That's what everyone thought. But no one knew the truth. No one knew that beneath the glittering gowns and polished shoes, beneath the practiced grins and effortless small talk, lay a past no one could have imagined. A past neither of them had fully grasped until this very moment. Inside the Pulaski High School prom, the ballroom was breathtaking. A canopy of twinkling chandeliers cast soft golden reflections over the marble floor. The DJ's bass-heavy mix sent tremors through the dance floor, where students swayed in slow motion, drowning in the heady cocktail of youth, adrenaline, and fleeting freedom. Tatum stood near the mirrored walls, adjusting the delicate straps of her navy blue dress. The reflection staring back at her looked composed, graceful, even, but she felt anything but. A sharp inhale, a forced smile. It was just prom, a night like any other. Then why did she feel like something was pressing against her chest, like she was on the verge of uncovering a truth she wasn't ready for? Leighton appeared beside her in the mirror, black tux crisp, hair slightly tousled, looking like he belonged in an old Hollywood movie. He flashed a half-smirk, but his eyes carried the same weight she felt pressing down on her own ribcage. "You okay?" he asked, smoothing his cufflinks. "Yeah," she lied, glancing back at their reflection. But her mind was already elsewhere. 18 years earlier. Another room, another reflection, a glass wall, a sterile hospital, two tiny infants in incubators. Her stomach clenched. Why was she thinking about that now? Their parents stood at the sidelines, watching the night unfold with warm amusement, champagne glasses in hand. Then, someone pulled out a photo, a wrinkled, faded Polaroid. It wasn't just any picture. It was an old hospital snapshot, yellowed at the edges but unmistakable. Two babies, impossibly small, lying side by side in separate incubators. Their families had taken that photo 18 years ago, a memory of a time when two fragile lives hung in the balance. The realization struck like lightning. "Oh, we have to recreate this." Tatum's mother gushed, holding up the old image. Tatum's stomach twisted. She wanted to protest, but before she could, she was pulled into place beside Leighton. The camera flash illuminated their faces, momentarily blinding her. The laughter of their parents filled the air, but something felt off. Like the ground beneath her feet had just shifted. Like the past was about to come crashing back. A voice, soft yet weighted with years of memory, broke through the noise. "It's incredible how life works, isn't it?" Tatum turned toward the source. Jamie Horton. She hadn't seen her in years, but she recognized that face instantly. The former NICU nurse who had been there since the very beginning. The woman who had whispered prayers over their tiny bodies, willing them to hold on just a little longer. Jamie's eyes flickered with something deeper than nostalgia as she looked at them. Something unspoken. Something only she knew. Leighton stiffened beside Tatum, his fingers curling into his palms. Jamie gave them a knowing smile, one that sent a chill down Tatum's spine. What did she know? Why did it feel like the truth was sitting just out of reach, waiting to be uncovered? The moment passed, but the weight of Jamie's words lingered. Minutes later, Tatum and Leighton were on the dance floor. The slow hum of a violin filled the air, and as he placed a careful hand on her waist, she felt a strange sense of déjà vu. Like they had done this before. Not as teenagers. Not at prom. But somewhere else. Somewhere much, much earlier. Leighton's grip tightened slightly, and when he looked at her, there was something troubled behind his gaze. Then, softly, almost hesitantly, he asked, "Do you ever think about how it all started?" Tatum felt her breath hitch. The past. The one she had buried for years was about to resurface. And this night, this seemingly ordinary prom night, was about to change everything. 18 years ago, they weren't dancing. They were fighting. Not for love, not for friendship, but for life. 18 years earlier, the world was not filled with prom lights and melodic violins. Instead, it was ruled by the harsh buzz of hospital alarms and the sterile fluorescence of an intensive care ward. It was late at night, or perhaps very early in the morning, when the two babies came into the world. The corridors of St. Mercy's Hospital reverberated with the frantic echoes of rushing footsteps. Anxious voices overlapped in a crescendo of fear and urgency. Nurses and doctors spoke in clipped tones, calling out medical terms that sounded more like foreign code than a plan to save precious lives. In the waiting area, two families, who would soon become forever linked, paced in circles. Tatum's father, pale and tight-lipped, clasped his wife's trembling hands. Leighton's mother fought to keep her tears at bay, biting down on her lip so hard it threatened to draw blood. Meanwhile, Leighton's father stood by the corridor window, eyes fixed on the flickering streetlight outside, as if searching for any sign of hope in the darkness. Then came the beeping machines, the squeak of rubber soles against polished floors, the hush that fell over the hallway when a single nurse stepped out, her face unreadable. Inside the neonatal intensive care unit, Tatum and Leighton, just hours old, lay in incubators. They were impossibly small, each fighting for air with lungs that weren't quite ready to breathe the world's oxygen. The machines around them hummed and hissed, regulating temperature, dispensing life-sustaining oxygen, and measuring weak heartbeats that occasionally spiked or dipped in terrifying patterns. Jamie Horton, the NICU nurse on duty, was in the thick of it. She had seen fragile babies before, had lived through the heartbreak of losing some and the triumph of saving others. But there was something about these two that clutched at her heart. Perhaps it was the way Tatum's tiny fingers wrapped around her index finger, refusing to let go even when her own vitals dipped, or the way Leighton's eyes fluttered open now and then, as if determined to take a peek at the world he was so keen to remain part of. Parents peered in through the glass, afraid to touch, afraid not to. All they could do was hope. Hope that the doctors were right. Hope that modern medicine would work its miracles. Hope that their children, so small and vulnerable, carried within them a hidden reserve of strength to see them through the worst. But it wasn't just the medical staff fighting for Tatum and Leighton's survival. Behind the scenes, their parents clung to every bit of optimism they could find. They read every pamphlet, every article, every thread of success stories, sometimes ignoring the grim statistics. Day and night blurred as they took turns keeping vigil at the foot of the incubators, each mother and father silently praying to whomever might be listening. Days stretched into weeks. There were moments when Tatum's oxygen levels stabilized, offering a faint glimmer of relief, only for Leighton's blood pressure to drop unexpectedly. At other times, Leighton's vitals rallied right as Tatum's feeding tube had to be replaced due to complications. An exhausting push and pull, teetering between despair and relief. Jamie Horton worked tirelessly, often off the clock, to check on both infants. She would gently whisper encouragement. "Hold on, little fighter, just a little longer," as if her voice alone might coax them into stability. Through it all, the two families found each other, exchanging tearful updates in the waiting room, offering tissues, or sharing coffee cups long gone cold. In the crucible of that neonatal ward, the first bonds were formed. Bonds that would outlast heartbreak and distance, forging a link between Tatum Kelly and Leighton long before either had taken more than a few labored breaths. When Tatum's heart rate finally steadied and Leighton began breathing without constant mechanical aid, it felt like the entire hospital let out a collective sigh of relief. Doctors started dropping hints like, "They might pull through," or "We're seeing good progress." Words that sounded like music to the parents' ears. During those long hospital stays, Tatum's mother and Leighton's mother clung to each other for solace. They realized that talking to someone who understood, really understood, was the only thing that kept them sane. Night after night, they'd meet in the corridor outside the NICU, two exhausted souls leaning against faded wallpaper, tears staining their cheeks as they recounted every new milestone or setback. A particular night remained etched in everyone's memory. Tatum's mother, delirious from lack of sleep, had collapsed into sobs by the vending machine. She was convinced that Tatum wouldn't make it, that the next phone call would bring the worst news possible. Leighton's mother had approached quietly, gently taking her hand. "She's strong," she said, voice quivering yet determined. "They both are." Somehow, those few words sparked a fragile hope. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Slowly, Tatum and Leighton fought their way from critical condition to a more stable status. The NICU began to feel like a second home to both families, if home could be a place defined by antiseptic smells and the anxious pulse of medical machinery. But the babies' paths were linked from the start. They often showed signs of improvement in tandem, as if reassuring each other through some invisible bond. Whenever Tatum's vitals showed a spike, it wasn't long before Leighton's did too. Their parents joked that they were cheering each other on in ways science couldn't explain. Finally, the day came when Tatum was strong enough to leave the hospital, swaddled in blankets and teary-eyed kisses. Leighton soon followed, and in that remarkable moment, two sets of parents walked out of those sliding doors holding a piece of each other's hearts, forever changed by what they had endured together. The first few years passed in a blur of milestones. Tatum and Leighton, once too weak to breathe on their own, grew into energetic toddlers who tumbled across living room floors and babbled with the unique language only very young children seem to understand. Their parents remained in touch, determined to keep the bond forged in the NICU alive. Playdates became the new normal, afternoons spent at local playgrounds or cozy weekends in each other's homes. Tatum's giggles echoed alongside Leighton's squeals as they chased each other around kitchen tables, strollers, and swing sets. A favorite memory for both families involved a backyard picnic. Tatum, her cheeks flushed pink, tried to show Leighton how to blow bubbles. Leighton, in turn, tried to eat them, giggling with uncontainable delight. The grown-ups snapped pictures, capturing the kind of joy that was once so uncertain in that hospital ward. "We'll be best friends forever," Tatum proclaimed one evening, pressing her little hand into Leighton's. He grinned, gap-toothed and proud, echoing the words with all the serious conviction a 5-year-old could muster. Best friends forever. But forever doesn't always last. When Leighton turned 6, his father's job required a relocation to a city hundreds of miles away. The news dropped like a stone into calm waters, sending ripples of sadness through both families. The kids were too young to grasp the scope of time and distance. Tatum cried in her bedroom, refusing to let go of her best friend. Leighton sulked for days, dreading the unfamiliar place he was being taken to. Their final playdate was overshadowed by silent tears and lingering hugs. Tatum's mother snapped one last photo of them together. Two small figures perched on the edge of a slide, arms around each other, eyes red from crying. In their innocence, they promised to write letters, to call each other every day, and to stay best friends, no matter what. The adults, touched by their devotion, exchanged contact information with renewed promises. "We'll visit soon, we'll make this work, and they'll always be friends." But as the months and years rolled by, phone calls became less frequent, birthdays passed with only an occasional greeting card, and visits morphed into a vague, one-day plan that never solidified. Distance has a way of dulling even the brightest connections, especially when you're too young to maintain them on your own. Eventually, Tatum's and Leighton's everyday lives filled with different schools, different friends, and different routines. The memories of that NICU and the blossoming bond of their earliest days faded into the background, replaced by the rush of growing up. Their story might have ended there, just another pair of childhood friends separated by miles. But fate had other plans. Little did they know that separation was only a chapter in the destiny they shared. And as the years went by, life was steadily weaving a path that would bring them back together, igniting a bond that began in the most uncertain place imaginable. The night sky stretched endlessly overhead, pinpricked by stars that shimmered with quiet intensity. Tatum and Leighton sat in the parked car, the aftermath of prom still pulsing through their veins. Their formal outfits felt slightly rumpled, the floral corsage on Tatum's wrist a little wilted, small reminders of how swiftly the evening had flown by. They both stared out the windshield, lost in thoughts laced with awe and gratitude. Finally, Leighton broke the silence. "Do you ever think maybe we were meant to find each other again?" Tatum exhaled softly. 1,000 half-formed answers crossed her mind, but none felt as true as the single nod that she managed. "Yeah," she whispered. "Sometimes it feels like fate had this planned all along." They exchanged a lingering look filled with unspoken memories, of tiny incubators, of nearly forgotten playdates, of the swirling lights of prom. It wasn't just about the past. It was about the future they could now envision, one in which they moved forward as friends, as something more, as two people who understood each other on a level that seemed almost impossible. Without another word, Leighton reached for Tatum's hand. In the hush of that still spring night, their connection felt unbreakable, forged in the earliest hours of their lives and reaffirmed under a canopy of stars. Far from the glitter of prom, in the quiet comfort of her bedroom, Tatum's mother sat beside Leighton's mother. Old photo albums were spread across the bed, pages bearing the weight of nearly 2 decades worth of memories. They paused at a page featuring tiny, swaddled infants in the NICU, tubes and wires a stark reminder of how delicate life had been. The mothers leaned in, eyes welling with tears. "They fought from the very first moment," Tatum's mom said, her voice trembling under the weight of gratitude. "Both of them. Fighters." Leighton's mother nodded, recalling the nights they'd prayed together, clinging to hope with every beep of the monitors. "We watched them grow stronger every day," she murmured, reaching out to squeeze her friend's hand. "And now look at them, dancing at prom, healthy, happy. It's like a miracle." They fell silent, letting the flood of memories wash over them. In that tender quiet, both women realized that the bond formed in that hospital ward was more than just friendship. It was family, woven by the threads of survival, love, and a promise that spanned a lifetime. A week after prom, Tatum and Leighton found themselves in her living room, surrounded by pictures, half-empty soda cans, and the warm laughter of reminiscing. Tatum's mother walked in holding a small envelope. "I have something for you," she said, handing it over with a smile that spoke volumes. Inside lay a single photograph, artfully split down the middle. On one side, Tatum and Leighton as tiny, fragile newborns in incubators, blinking against the harsh hospital lights, names scrawled on labels attached to the plastic domes. On the other, the pair from prom night, older, confident, smiling in formal attire as though they had the entire world at their feet. Tatum ran her fingers over the image, her throat tight with emotion. Leighton let out a soft laugh, shaking his head at the sheer improbability of it all. In those two starkly different snapshots, they saw an entire journey. The precarious beginnings, the separation, the reunion, and the promise of a shared future. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Tatum murmured. Leighton draped an arm over her shoulder, nodding. "And something tells me we still have a long way to go together." In that final moment, they understood the heart of their story. It wasn't just about surviving those first fragile weeks or dancing under shimmering prom lights. It was about the unbreakable thread that had tied them together all along, proof that sometimes, in life's darkest corners, we forge the brightest bonds.